Hi, everybody. It's Jim. Great Books, Big Ideas. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to do a response video today to your questions. I solicited a Q&A from the audience in acknowledgement of an achievement on this channel. We've reached the 2,000 subscriber milestone, and really thrilled about that. Thank you all for watching these videos, and those of you who have subscribed, I truly do appreciate it. So you came up with some great questions here. So in keeping with tradition, I'm going to respond to these questions right now, and we'll just jump right into it. So our first question comes from Karen, and she says, I have enjoyed your videos as I am a lifetime reader. I finally acquired a good set of the great books for a reasonable price last year to add to my library. Congratulations, Karen. Enjoy that set. What do you think about the Story of Civilization series by Durant and its comparison to the great books? What was your major and minor in college? And what classes do or did you teach and where? Thank you, and please don't stop posting. That's from Karen. Karen, thank you. I have no plans to stop posting. God willing, I'll keep at this for a while. And I can respond to most of these questions. For the first one on the Durant Story of Civilization, that's a tough one for me to comment on because I really haven't read that series. I think I have one volume of that, and then I did come across like an ebook version, and I've only dipped into that. So I can't really make any comparisons. That Story of Civilization series, well, you see them all the time in used bookstores. They were quite popular. I think they look great. Like, I want to read those, but I can't really compare them to the great books. All I'll say is it seems like the Durant is more like historical survey, whereas the great books is just you're getting primary texts. So it's like really different ways to go about looking at the tradition. As for my major and minor in college, I majored in English, and then I ended up taking a second major in Latin, of all things. So we had to do a language requirement. So I was committed to taking 4 semesters of Latin. I did not take Latin in high school. I took French and then Spanish for 1 year. And the Latin professor kind of talked me into that second major. He was also a good cook too, so he had very small classes, and we would, after the intro class, like we would have a class in his office, and there would be maybe like 5 of us in a class, and he would make us meals at night. We had night classes usually. So that was a good sell for the Latin major. But I mainly thought of myself as an English major with a particular interest in creative writing. And then I majored in English in grad school, got my master's degree, and my concentration was in creative writing. As far as the what classes do or did you teach and where, I was very much of an adjunct gypsy. I taught at various schools in the early part of my career and very sporadically. So I was always like doing professional writing work, but then I would dabble in adjunct teaching. So early on, I think I taught 1 or 2 semesters at Westchester University, my undergraduate alma mater. And then I taught at Widener University in Chester, Pennsylvania. I taught, when we moved to St. Louis for about 4 years, I taught at St. Louis Community College. And then when we moved back, eventually I taught as an adjunct at Immaculata University, which is a small Catholic college, also at Cabrini College, which was a small Catholic college, just recently shut down. And it's a victim of the great shrinkage that's happening in higher education these days. Cabrini College was on the main line. They actually got sort of swallowed up by Villanova. And Villanova, I think, has that property now, but the college is no more. And also taught at Widener, again, in Chester, Pennsylvania. And ultimately, I landed a full-time, non-tenure track instructor job or lecturer job, I guess they call me, senior lecturer or something like that, at Widener. And I taught there for over 20 years. And then after taking a buyout from Widener, I have transitioned to online teaching. So I just teach from home now. And I teach at Southern New Hampshire University and also Unitech College, which is based in like the Western United States, California, but also the Rocky Mountain West and the Southwest. They're primarily like a nursing school. But as for what I taught and what I do teach, primarily it was first year writing classes. We call it freshman comp. Also, I taught first year introduction to literature classes. Sometimes I would teach introduction to creative writing. And these were mostly populated by first year students, not exclusively, but mostly. And then more rarely, I would teach, I got the opportunity to teach a few literary survey courses where you would get more English majors. So courses like Western World Lit, Part 1 and Part 2. I taught those a few times. And then also, I think for one semester, I taught an American Lit survey course. And then I also would teach, earlier in my career, I would teach what was called professional writing or business writing. And sometimes that would include technical writing. And for a while at Widener, I got extra like overload work teaching through their engineering school. They had a professional writing class, but also just as part of the gen ed realm, there was a professional writing course, like an intro course. And sometimes I would fill in for a professor who might be on sabbatical. So I got the opportunity to teach an advanced fiction writing class one semester, but mostly it was first year students. Okay, on to a question from a viewer by the handle Sabrina Larson 7. And Sabrina asks, what book have you read that you didn't particularly enjoy, but now reading at a different season in your life has grown in value and appreciation to you personally? Well, this is a great question because I'm very into rereading these days. And so I will answer it with the first two books that popped into my head. One would be Ulysses by James Joyce, and the second is City of God by St. Augustine, a book I'm currently reading. I haven't finished it yet. Ulysses, I read it a long, long, long time ago, Modern Library Edition. It was actually my father's copy. And I think I just read that book to check the box, to say, like, I have read Ulysses. But the book was a slog. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, parts of it I liked, but I wasn't. And I like James Joyce. I really love Dubliners. I love Portrait of the Artist. But, you know, Ulysses was tough going. I finished it, but I can't say I really enjoyed it. But when I reread it just a few years ago, and I made a video about this when I first started this channel, I really was, it was just a flip. Like I got the book. It just made such a great impression on me, and I got so much more out of it the second time through. And being older, I think, had a lot to do with that. The book was less intimidating to me, and I connected to it. I kind of understood what he was up to better, and it wasn't just all pyrotechnics and flashiness. It was like there was a real purpose to what he was doing. So Ulysses would certainly be one. And then City of God is a book I just gave up on the first time through. I just couldn't. I don't think I was thinking very much in religion mode at the time. And I think this was back in the days when we lived in St. Louis, Missouri, probably, well, it would have been in the early 90s. We're getting into the mid 90s. And we moved there in 93. And yeah, I just gave up on City of God. Like I just couldn't take it. But then in the last year or two, I picked it up again as part of my Great Books of the Western World reading project. And, it's just hitting me a little bit differently. I'm maybe a little more forgiving of what St. Augustine is up to, and I'm getting more out of it. So, but I think the best example would be Ulysses by James Joyce. So thank you, Sabrina Larson-7, for that question. Let's move on to a question from the handle Whale Sequence. Whale Sequence asks, were you able to teach full novels at any point in your teaching career? And if so, which was your favorite? Also, do you have a top 5 or 10 favorite novels? Well, yes, I did teach full novels, even in these intro lit courses. I think I was an outlier that way. And, I would really pour it on. But anyway, are there favorite teaching books? There's really too many favorites, but I will rattle off several of them here. These are ones that kind of came to mind. I'm pretty much like teaching almost everything I assigned, but these are some memorable ones. Damien by Hermann Hesse, I taught that a few times, really liked it. How to Breathe Underwater, which is not a novel, but it's a collection of short stories by contemporary American author Julie Oringer. Terrific short story collection, and that seemed to hit the students, where it mattered. Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger, I taught that several times, always enjoyed it. The Fall by Albert Camus, I think I only taught it once, but it was a really memorable one. And just as a sidebar, I had an engineering student in that class, and he was a very good student, a little older. He was a Navy veteran, and a couple years after that class, I ran into him, and they were kind of on the verge of graduation, and the him was now a her, the he was a she. So she made a transition, and she said that that book, The Fall, really spoke to her and unlocked something, and I think played some kind of catalyzing role in this transition that they went through. And I never would have seen that coming, but it was a really interesting point, and I appreciated that they shared it with me. I taught Salvage the Bones in that same course, by the way, by Jesmond Ward. That's a contemporary novel. I think it was an award winner. The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. I taught that many times. Loved it. Disturbing book, but it's unforgettable. I love that book. I read that in high school too, and it was great to come back to it. Into the Wild by John Krakauer. Like, that was a creative nonfiction book that I taught a few times. Especially, I had this one course I would teach. It was like we had these different varieties of intro to lit. So it was the environmental lit variety of intro to lit, and that was a good match for that. Also in that realm was Walden by Henry David Thoreau. I never taught the whole book, but the excerpts that I did teach, certain chapters, always were very meaningful to me, and I think turned some heads in the class. A couple times I taught T.C. Boyle novels like Drop City and A Friend of the Earth. He was fun to teach. Vida, which is a collection of linked short stories by Patricia Engel, who is a Colombian-American author. I think she's based in Florida. And that always went over well. And I no longer have a copy of that book, but I taught it a bunch. And the stories were easy. It was cool how they were linked, so you kind of follow the thread of the main character. And the students seemed to respond to that one really well. Eat the Document by Dana Spiotta. Dana Spiotta, I didn't know much about, but I saw her on a panel discussion at the AWP conference in Boston. This was probably back around, I don't know when it was, 2015, 2014, I don't remember. But it was, she shared the stage with Don DeLillo, who is a friend of hers, and I liked hearing her, and I got intrigued about her books. So I bought a couple copies of her books, which are signed, by the way. I bought them from, they had a book fair at the conference. And Eat the Document is a story about the, like the 60s, 70s counterculture, and a woman who participates in a botched, well, it's kind of like a terrorist bombing kind of incident, and she goes on the run incognito, and you follow her around, and it's an interesting book. I should do a video on it someday, because I remember it really vividly, and there's a lot of intertextuality with that book. It was a bit of a challenging read for the students, but some students really liked it. Yeah, Eat the Document is a good one. Her other book, Stone Arabia, was very good too. I never taught it. And then there was another one she wrote, which I can't remember the title of, but it was more recent. But I didn't think that was quite as strong as the other two. I also taught. This is getting out of novels realm, but I taught a lot of Ibsen in my intro lit classes, especially A Doll's House, but also Hedda Gabler and Enemy of the People. I taught that a bunch. I just huge Ibsen fan. I taught Ovid, Metamorphosis, not the whole thing, but we read like good chunks of it. Sophocles' Theban plays, they were always big hits. Richard Brautigan, Trout Fishing in America and In Watermelon Sugar. One year I taught like a themed intro to lit class, which was very much themed on like countercultural type literature. So they went well with that. Jack Kerouac, Dharma Bums, I taught that a few times. I think Dharma Bums is probably a better book than On the Road. More going on, I think. Kafka's Metamorphosis, that was a novella I used to teach all the time. The Yellow Wallpaper and Other Stories, which was a little Dover Thrift edition, that was in regular rotation. Frederick Douglass, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, a book I'm thinking about teaching on this channel, possibly in February, so heads up for that. If you're interested in reading Frederick Douglass with me, let me know in the comments. The list goes on. There's a whole bunch more, but I always was sneaking books, novels, full-length plays into my intro to lit classes. As far as my top novels, well, yeah, this list would always be changing probably, but these are just off the top of my head in no particular order. In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust, obviously. Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, what a terrific book. Death of Ivan Ilyich, the novella by Tolstoy. Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I do like Hermann Hesse. Probably my favorite novels by him would be Damien and Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf's another one I taught once in college. I don't think the students know what the hell to think of that one, but I enjoyed teaching it. The Stranger by Albert Camus, another book I taught at least once. Thomas Hardy, Test of the D'Urbervilles and Jude the Obscure, probably the saddest novel I've ever read, but boy, does that hit home. Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. You could throw Sentimental Education in there as well as a great one. Balzac, I'm a huge Balzac fan. Two of my favorites by him would be Pere Goriot and The Wild Ass's Skin, sometimes translated as The Magic Skin. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. The Avignon Quintet by Lawrence Durrell. I'm cheating a little bit because that's like 5 books, but we'll count them as one. And Franny and Zoe by J.D. Salinger. I love Catcher in the Rye too, but I'll just mention Franny and Zoe because I've read it more than Catcher. But that list is always changing, and I'm sure I left some big ones out. So thank you for that question, Whale Sequence. Next up, we go to Sarah Great Books. And Sarah says, congrats, Jim. Thank you. Great content and well done for consistent uploading. Can you show us your Franklin Library editions of Great Books of the Western World again? All the best. Yes, I can. Okay, I don't have a ton of these Franklin Library Great Books of the Western World volumes. They tend to be pricey, and I'm no plans to collect them all. I'm just collecting some of my favorite authors from them, but I'm happy to share these with you again. So I did eventually collect the full run of Montaigne's essays, volumes 1, 2, 3, here in red leather. And these are not, it's a shame these aren't as illustrated, but they do have, that's a nice design in those titles. So we've got Montaigne. I have 2 volumes of Plutarch, and these are in sort of a black leather. And these, how many volumes are there? I think there's, I don't know. I want to say there's maybe 4 volumes of these, but these have some illustrations like that in there. Very nice readable copies. And then only 2 more. I have the first of the 6 volumes of Shakespeare's works in red leather. And these are illustrated. And then finally, I have Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. This one is the only copy I have that comes with the little booklet inside, introducing you to the book. And this one does have illustrations as well. And these are leather. Let's show you some of the designs like that. These are really lovely editions. Now, I do have some breaking news. I just put in an order at eBay for a couple more volumes that I found at a pretty cheap price. I'm not going to announce them here because I want to make sure they truly are the right editions, because Franklin Library published classic books in lots of different series. And the Great Books of the Western World, the 25th anniversary edition, is just one of those. So sometimes I'm a little wary of these descriptions from the booksellers. Did you get it right? Is this really the Great Books of the Western World? The picture looked right, but sometimes you don't know if that's a stock picture when you buy the book. So, that'll be breaking news when those come in about a week. And I will add 2 more titles, hopefully, to my small collection of Great Books of the Western World Franklin Library titles. Thanks for the question. Next up is a question from John VJTR3Y, True YT2. And John says, hello, Mr. Jim. Congratulations on 2,000 plus subscribers here on your YouTube channel. Thank you. I've been following this YouTube channel for approximately a year and a half myself, and I had a question about the Encyclopedia Britannica Great Books of the Western World series. If you could update the series, keeping the same themed colors, which books would you add, and which would you take away? Would you delete any books or add any books that would be newer classes of classic literature created within the last 16 years or around the time Encyclopedia Britannica stopped publishing physical print copies of Great Books of the Western World? That's a great question. I would always want to be updating this series. I wish Britannica would undertake the project. If you're listening, Britannica, I think there's an audience out here. We would love to see it come back. And you can put me on the advisory board if you want. But in my humble opinion, the biggest oversight of the great books of the Western world was the absence of Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's unfathomable to me why they left that out. Not only is it great poetry and it's a new take on the epic form, but it was so influential in the tradition of the West. I mean, Ovid survives the Middle Ages. They were like reading Ovid. He was kind of lingering around all the way up to the Renaissance. He influences the great art of the West, and he has so much modern resonance. That was a big, massive oversight to leave Ovid out. I would probably thin some of the math science texts. I know I'm biased here and I'm also ignorant, but I'm not knowledgeable enough to know which ones should be cut. But, authors, like Ptolemy, I'm not sure we need all that. But, who knows? I would make cuts in the math science to make room for other authors like Ovid. I might also cut Boswell's Life of Johnson to make room. I have not read that book, so, I might change my mind once I do read it. But it just seems like that would be one where he could pick up some space. As far as newer stuff, that's hard for me to say because I don't read enough newer stuff. And I'm wary of giving the brand, the label classic to something that hasn't been around long enough yet. But I would surely like to see more Latin American authors represented in the great books because, in my opinion, from let's say the mid 20th century up through the late 20th century, that's where the action was in fiction, especially like those authors, like people like Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Jorge Luis Borges and Carlos Fuentes and so many others, Isabel Allende and others, like they were just cranking out like really, really interesting fiction. And I think, there's some classics in there that would be nice. Now, I think Borges might actually be in the second edition of Great Books of the Western World. I can't remember quite, but if he is, it's very small sampling. But yeah, I would like to see more of that. I'm not up to speed on modern classics, but I'd say that my rule of thumb would be you'd have to leave out works published within the last 40 years or so because it's just too soon to know if a book has staying power. And I know you're going to leave out stuff that will become classics, but that would be my cutoff somewhere around the year 1980. So anything before 1980 would be fair game. But maybe you can weigh in the comments section and think about books from, let's say, the latter half of the 20th century up until about 1980 that you think would belong in the great book set. And this isn't just literature. It could be philosophy, history, things like that. All right, next up we have a question from Dalby Books 63, Denise at Dalby Books. I highly recommend her BookTube channel. She's great. Maybe this isn't the right question, but let's see. What's your emphasis or specialty as an English teacher? You said that your wife teaches English as well. Does she also teach at a college? And if so, what is her specialty? Great question, Denise. Well, I talked about this a little bit with an earlier question, but my emphasis was first year writing and intro to lit classes and a little bit of intro to creative writing. And yes, my wife teaches at a university right here in our hometown. You can actually walk to work from here. I, on the other hand, had to drive 37 minutes to get to my job. but my wife, is really close. And now that I'm just working from home now, I usually take her into work. It's, literally like a 2-minute drive. But yeah, so her specialty is pretty similar to mine, like first year writing, intro to literature types of courses. Next, we have another one of my favorite booktubers, Libro Paradiso. And he asks, my question is, when you lived in Austin, did you frequent Hippie Hollow? If you'd rather not answer it, then your favorite Austin memory. So we have some shared history, like we both lived in Austin. Libro Paradiso, I'm not sure if you still live in Austin. I don't think you do, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I think we even overlapped a little bit in the years that I was down there in graduate school. I was only down there from like fall of 86 through spring of 87. And then I came home for the summer and I came back and finished up in that fall of 87. I actually got my master's in a year and a half. But anyway, Austin was unforgettable. So Hippie Hollow, what is Hippie Hollow? If you don't know your Austin facts, that is a rocky beach on Lake Travis, which is outside of Austin, not far at all. And it is a clothing optional beach. I think it's the only clothing optional park in Texas. And this goes back to the hippie days, back when Austin was truly weird. And to answer your question, yes, I did go to Hippie Hollow. I think I only was there once. And I'm going to lose subscribers right now, but I actually skinny dipped in Hippie Hollow. I have to say, shortly after I moved to Austin, it was August of 1986 when I moved down there. A couple of my college buddies from Westchester, they came to visit. And one of them was just about to go into the Army. He was going to be at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, like artillery school, I think he was in. But anyway, they came down to visit, and yes, we went to Hippie Hollow, and we skinny dipped in Hippie Hollow, and it was a beautiful spot, kind of a rocky little cove beach, nice views, the water was nice. And I'm not going to say much more about it because, all I will say is I'm glad we didn't have smartphones back then. So as far as I'll answer the second part of your question too, Libro Paradiso, because you got me thinking about Austin. My favorite Austin memory. That's a tough one. I can't pick one favorite. I had some good memories of the live music scene. Like the music was amazing down there. 6th Street, like just bar after bar after bar. Like every place had live music for about 6 blocks, it seemed. That was really unlike anything I'd ever seen before. As a poor grad student, and I was really poor, I would take the shuttle bus to 6th Street and go to the happy hours at these places where you could get free food. So that was how I kind of kept myself fed for a while. And I remember we would go to Texas French bread like after hours, and we would get like the day old bread that they left out in a bin in front of the store. Like, so we were really we were poor grad students. I have really, in terms of the academics, I have some very good memories of the Harry Ransom Research Center, which is just enormous research library at Texas. Everything's on a big scale at University of Texas, Austin. And I got to read type-signed letters by J.D. Salinger, which were things that nobody was allowed to publish back then. They were so funny. Oh my goodness, what a sense of humor he had. There was another guy who was doing research. I think this grad student, I think he was from Iceland, but he was kind of big into the Romantic poets. So he was doing a research project on Lord Byron, and he had handwritten letters by Lord Byron. And I remember him waving me over, and he's like, check this out. And he's like, there was a breakup letter that Lord Byron had written to one of his many girlfriends. It possibly was a cousin. I'm not sure. But anyway, he had included locks of his hair tied up with a ribbon. So I got to actually hold Lord Byron's hair in my fingertips. That was memorable. When I was doing a research project on, I was taking a comparative translation class, and I was researching the Latin poet Catullus, and I was comparing different English translations of some of his more obscene poetry. And I got to look at James Joyce's copy of Catullus with his annotations in it, because they had everything at this Harry Ransom Center. They had James Joyce's library. They had the costumes for the Wizard of Oz. They had all kinds of stuff. Like, they had so much money down there, all that oil money that was funding the university. They were just gobbling up like collections and writers' manuscripts and stuff. But that was pretty cool. It was a wild place. I remember Barton Springs, swimming at Barton Springs, this very cold, spring-fed pool right in Austin. I was with a fellow writing student who went on to pretty great acclaim, an author some of you might be familiar with. He's from what was known as Yugoslavia, but he's basically Croatian. Josip Novakovic, remember going to Barton Springs with him and swimming. And when my girlfriend came down, later became my wife, we saw Norman and Nancy Blake perform at the Cactus Cafe. The Cactus Cafe was this little, really basically like a little bar club in the university, like in the student union building. That was mind blowing just in and of itself. But Norman and Blake is this great bluegrass folk guitarist, and his wife Nancy, also an amazing musician. And here we were, like basically an audience of maybe like 20 people in this place, up close and personal, watching this guy, like a virtuoso bluegrass player. That was pretty memorable too. So that's more than enough Austin memories for one video. But thanks for facilitating some of that, those memories, Libro Paradiso. And if you please check out Libro Paradiso's channel, like, he's terrific. Anyway, next question. The handle here is Planet Hamlet. I love that handle. What are some of your favorite poems? What got you into reading, and at what age? Who are your all-time favorite authors? Okay, these are tough questions because my opinion has changed all the time, but I'll take a stab at it. Favorite poems? That's really tough, but some stuff that just sort of immediately pops into my head. I love Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. I love Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. I love Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats. I love Ode Intimations of Immortality by William Wordsworth. I love all the Japanese haiku masters. I love To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell, a poem I used to teach. It was so much fun to teach that on the Carpe Diem theme. Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. I love that poem, and I actually memorized that poem. I love Hal by Allen Ginsberg. That I taught as well once or twice. I'm sure I'm leaving so many favorites out, but I'll finish this video and I'll think of like half a dozen more, but that just gives you a little bit of a sampling. I have loved reading for as long as I can remember. I had a wonderful first grade teacher, Mrs. Blockley, who she was just terrific. Boy, she was a great teacher. And she really instilled a love of reading and writing in me. And here's a sidebar, but her daughter, it so turns out, ended up as a university professor at University of Texas, Austin. She was, I assume she's still down there. She is a medievalist. And Yeah, so when I moved down there to Austin, I actually met her, and I think we went out to lunch once. Like, so that was really cool. But yeah, Mrs. Blockley, first grade, she was great. And then my mother, I have to give a lot of credit to Mom. She would read to us. She read us stories from the Bible and other books. And I also loved my Scholastic Book Club books. That certainly fueled my love of reading. All-time favorite authors. Well, yeah, again, it's not going to be a surprise based on books I've already discussed, but I would put on my top list, in no particular order, but Marcel Proust, of course, Dostoevsky, Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, Shakespeare, Ibsen. I just love Ibsen. I've read all his plays. Sophocles, Samuel Beckett, I'm a big fan of, Gustave Flaubert, Balzac, Thoreau, Thomas Mann, Tolstoy, Richard Brautigan, Borges, Ovid, Homer, Lawrence Durrell, I really like, Virginia Woolf, William Faulkner, and John Gardner, someone who doesn't get maybe the acclaim he deserves. But that's just a list. I could double that list easily. All right, next question. This is from Teddy Toto. Teddy says, congratulations. Thank you, Teddy. Would you be willing to make videos that allow this community to read a work along with you? A kind of update video that gives us all a heads up for the next week, month, or year. Apologies in advance if you're already doing this, as I'm a relatively recent subscriber. Well, welcome to the party, Teddy. I really appreciate you subscribing. But yes, I'd love to do read-alongs and read aloud videos, and or still working out like what direction I want to go in with that. I should really do more, I don't know what we would call them, heads up videos to talk about books that are on deck. So if people wanted to read along, they could. The only nod to this that I do currently do is my Great Books of the Western World 10-year reading plan, which I'm taking out of that second edition list for their Great Conversation book. So in that case, you have a list and you can look ahead and see what's next. And I always talk about what's coming next at the end of each video. Next up, by the way, very soon is Selected Essays by Montaigne. But I could do this for my other reading as well. Like when I do reading updates, maybe I could have a little segment on, books that I'm like planning to read soon, or books that I'm going to finish soon. I'm also toying with the idea of doing more teaching. Like I hate to call them teaching videos, but that's sort of what they are, lecture teaching type things. And if I can get that together, I'll make posts on this channel, maybe a short, and I'll also talk about it in a reading update video as to like, here's a coming attraction, like if anyone wants to read this along with me, let's do it. I think the #1 candidate that I'm thinking of for next month is to read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass with you all, because I have good notes on that. I taught it a ton, and I love that book. And I think I'll probably make an announcement on that real soon. So thank you for your suggestions, Teddy Toto. Thanks to everybody for the questions. You're a great community. You're a great audience. I love my viewers. I love reading your comments and your questions. Keep them coming. When we hit 3,000, like let's just think optimistically. If we hit 3,000, we'll do this again someday. But don't wait till 3,000. You can always ask me questions. And also, I always forget this, but you can email me too. So if you'd rather not comment in public on YouTube, just drop me a line by email. The email address is in the show description always. And hope to stay in touch with you and keep on watching. If you're new to the channel, hope you become a subscriber. Don't forget to like the video. But, we'll see you again someday. Bye-bye.